forgot to put my microphone on. I'm going to do this right here. Okay, that's probably... see how loud all of this is. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be making another painting by another one of my very, very favorite artists. And it happens to be the second painting by the same artist. I've done this a few times before, but I just could not move on. Even though we're going to do another episode in about 3 hours from now, so I got to race. I just could not move on without really giving Yayoi Kusama her complete due. Just on Thursday, we did do a painting of hers. We made her very iconic image of the, well, this flower painting. And I love this painting. It was really interesting. It was a great learning experience for me, just in terms of how quickly we could get something done that is this complex. So here's that painting there. And I chose this painting because I love the original. I think I did a pretty good job. But this is a little bit more of sort of like, to use like a musical term, like a deep cut, you know, like a rare B-side that maybe less people who know this fantastic artist would recognize this particular image. And as just spontaneously about 20 minutes ago, I was like, you know what, let's, you know, I could do a whole bunch of other things that I have to do, but this would be something that would make me feel really happy if I could get this done. So let's take a look at this painting here. Where is it? There we go. Okay, so this is the painting we're gonna make. It is, we've got, what is it, so we've got about 3 hours until the next episode that I'm filming on the Yoshitomo Nara painting that we're about to do this afternoon. So that means there's some good added pressure too, where we've got to do this in a reasonable amount of time so that we can do a whole other painting by a whole other artist. Okay, so I'm going to move this painting off to the side, and here is the beginnings of the painting we're going to do today. So I have already gone and traced out this painting, and here's the tracing of it. And I'll show you where you can download that same file. There's a link down below for the Master Study series, and in here you'll see there's a Dropbox folder. And in that Dropbox folder, I keep on doing that. Okay, that's where we go. You'll see, here's a list of all the artists we've done so far in this series. I did a whole 45 episode long series of other artists, so you can watch those if you don't see the artists you like here. And if we scroll down here all the way down to Yayoi Kusama, we will see there's 6 files in here. These 3 files were from the previous episode, where we painted the flower you saw. And then these 3 files are for today's episode. And essentially there's 2 versions of this outline. One's a PDF and one's a JPEG, whichever is easier for you to print out. And then of course the original image as well. I've already gone ahead and traced out the image, but I will say I traced this out, what was it, last week. And let me see if I can dig up that file. I want to play a quick video. Because I'll just show you kind of quickly how I trace out files, etc. Or these images. So let's Yeah, I'm gonna play this in the background. Oops. So I'll play it, and then I'm going to talk over top of it while it's playing here. So that's the carbon paper that I use to do these. And you can see here's, I'm going to scroll right through this real quick. There's the first one. There's the one we're doing this afternoon. And then here's this is the one that we're about to do. So I just, I printed it out on just a regular inkjet printer with on regular paper. You can use photocopy paper. It doesn't matter. The paper I use is actually a little bit thicker. And then I just do my best to try to get it roughly centered. We don't always put them right in the middle, but for this one, I think right in the middle works perfectly fine. You see I just tape it down, and then I'm going to get some carbon paper, and there's a sheet of carbon paper I've used many times, and you can see that we can use it over and over and over again. I think some people, at least I originally felt like, oh, you got to use a brand new piece of carbon paper every single time you do this. And then you can see here, I think I sharpened this pencil, and then I just went and did all of these lines on here. Now, obviously the original doesn't have a whole bunch, see there it is. That's what it looks like. And this is what I would encourage you to do, is just to do this and then leave it like that, because in a couple seconds I'm actually going to paint the whole background. But anyway, I did go and I traced out all of this around the edges. And okay, so yeah. So now what we're going to do is we are going to start painting this. Come on, where's my file? There we go. So you can keep this, or you can throw it away, recycle it, probably is even the best way, or you can give it to somebody else to color in, maybe a little kid in your family that might appreciate that opportunity. Okay, so let's get out some tools here. Everything that I use for this class is can all fit inside of this shoebox, which is one of my favorite things about painting. I think there's this big misconception that to make a painting you need a lot of room and you need a lot of expensive materials. Hopefully one of the things that people see from these episodes is that we can do a lot with very little. Now obviously we're not going to use most of those colors. I don't even know why I got them out. But maybe if you want to go a little bit wild and try doing some different things with the colors, you're certainly encouraged and invited to do that. I think basically to do this painting, all we need really is our warm yellow and black. You may want to have a little bit, well, actually some white as well, because we're going to have to do a little bit of making some lines with white. So really we should be able to do the entire painting with just this set of colors. The original, it could be, let me see, where's, okay. So the original color, the yellow that she's using is probably a little bit of a mix between the warm yellow and the cool yellow. So if you really wanted to nail it, you could maybe mix this with just a little bit of the cool yellow. You could potentially, actually, that's yeah. For our purpose though, I'm just going to use straight warm yellow right out of the tube. So let's squeeze some of that on the palette. How much yeah, we'll put a little bit more on there. And let's put, I see Deborah says, "Hi Michael, is there going to be a link to the session? I just got in from paddleboarding and have much to do for this evening." I did put a link on the Facebook page. Let me just see. I didn't, so here's, let's zoom down here. This is the episode we're going to film this afternoon. And then this is the one that we're doing right now. So I did just throw it in there on the Facebook page, which, if you're wondering what Deborah's talking about, why we're talking about the, where did I post it? That's the Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group just for people like you who are watching me right now and who want to see what upcoming episodes are. I mean, you can also like and subscribe to the channel, right, of course. But if you want to know what's coming down the pipelines, or you want to watch older episodes and they're all kind of nice and archived like that, you can do that. As well, there's a whole community of people who are painting along with me and uploading their versions of each painting every single class, and their own paintings, things that they're interested in and are exploring on their own, which is ultimately the goal, or my goal anyway, for these classes. Okay, so let's get right to the painting here. I'm going to get... I'm going to... Yeah, I think the smaller brush should be kind of fine. Okay. Generally, you know what? Often what I do is I put a little bit of water into the paint when I first start a painting so that it kind of thins it out a little bit and I can see my lines underneath here a little bit better. But for today's episode, I want these colors to be relatively opaque. I don't want too many of these lines. Ideally, if they don't show up at all, that would be great. So I'm just going to take the paint right out of the tube here, and I'm going to smear it all over this. In fact, now that I see it, I may even want to do another coat of it. And you can see I'm just going to paint over the pumpkin itself. And I'm going to paint the background entirely black. That's why I suggested to not even bother drawing the outlines. I did show, if you want a kind of a different approach than the one that I'm about to do, you can look at the previous Yayoi Kusama episode of the flower, and you can see that I used two different methods. I'm going to use the second method that we did in that class for today's painting. And don't worry about painting outside the edges, because we're going to paint black right over top of it, and it's going to just obliterate whatever's outside those edges. So in fact, probably a better idea for me would be to kind of go outside these edges a little bit, and that gives me a little bit of breathing room, right? So that's what I'm just going to do right now. Because I want to clean all that up with some black paint. And I want to try to avoid getting any lines. That's why I'm kind of just... I don't want any texture, I mean, sorry. So I'm just going to go around there like that. Now, this is still... I can still see these lines really clearly. And these lines are really just guidelines. You can see in the original, there's no lines inside here. It's all dots. I'm going to do all those dots by hand, but these lines are there to help me figure out where the dots are going to go, right? So we've got this in place. And, oops, let me get my blow dryer. After I knock a whole bunch of things over. Ah! Usually at this time of day, I'm taking care of our daughter, but we have kind of a special opportunity for our nanny to take a little bit extra care of her this week, so there's kind of perfect opportunity for me to just do something a little bit new. So this yellow is relatively transparent, so we have to put a few layers on. You could, I could have maybe even put a little bit of white in here to make it a little bit more opaque to speed this whole process up, but that white does such a great job of covering that sometimes I'm a little bit leery of using it at all because I don't want to cover too much up, right? So the safer and yet slower way to do it is to do it this way, is to put just put your layers of paint on and blow dry it. Actually, just get right up to these edges. You might be tempted to put big gobs of paint on there because you might be a little bit impatient. The thing with big gobs of paint is it takes longer to dry, and you can get undesirable texture if you're not careful. This is going very slow. So you know what? I think I am going to put a little bit of white in. That might mean I have to do another coat of yellow over top of it to get the color back to this. So here, put a bit of white, and I'm just gonna, let's mix this in. That's gonna help the coverage dramatically. This might be one of those things that I regret in a few minutes because I obliterate all these lines. Yeah, this is... Oh, Michael. Oh, goodness. I can barely see, and I gotta put another layer of paint over top of this to get the color back to the yellow I want. So I'm just gonna try to blend this white out a bit. I need to get a t-shirt made or something that has some kind of quote like, don't listen, don't do anything I do, just watch me for mistakes. I mean, that's not bad. I mean, again, we'll see how well these lines show up in the next layer of paint I'm about to do. So this is an old, well not, this is actually a sock that I wore on my wedding day. I had pink socks. All the groomsmen and myself had pink socks, so I get to recycle it into a painting. Now I'm just going to take some of the regular yellow that I had. This is my warm yellow again. And that's, yeah, you could still kind of see the, I mean, I can see it myself on camera, or in person, but it's definitely kind of disappearing on camera there, which is a good thing. I mean, really, you don't really want to be able to see these lines at all. They're really just for your reference as you're painting it. Okay. Cool. So I'm going to blow dry this, and then I'm just going to paint black all the way around. Now, a couple things. Obviously, probably the fastest solution to all of this would be to just draw those initial lines much more lightly, so that there's just less paint required to kind of cover and hide them. The one thing I would say is that now that I've done this, and it's not totally dry because I'm not going to paint on there for a few minutes anyway, but it's now very smooth. We've got 4 layers of paint here, which means this is, it's like a skating rink slick. And I would say for what we're going to do today, we're going to paint like hundreds of little circles all over here. That's going to make my life a lot easier. So doing any kind of fine detailing like that, the smoother the surface, the better. And one of the things I forgot to mention, it might have been there, I skipped over it pretty quickly when I was showing the outlining process, is for every canvas, I get these. This is, a canvas, a 9x12 canvas that I bought off Amazon. If you want to get the exact same brand, which I think work really well, there's a link down below for that. And so I get these canvases, and then I put some white acrylic gesso over it, let it dry overnight, and then sand it before I put the outline on. So that also helps smooth the surface more. Personally, I want the smoothest surface I can possibly have to make my paintings. I find that so much easier than painting on a rough surface, but there are other artists who love really highly textured canvases, and who paint on burlap and all sorts of other things. So now I'm going to paint black all around here. So I'm just basically obliterating those pencil lines that I did earlier. So that's why I was saying, you know what? Just skip it. Skip the pencil lines and move right to this stage. I mean, do the ones inside the pumpkins that we just spent all that time trying to hide, but don't worry about these, because I've got another solution that I tried out in the other Yayoi Kusama episode that worked quite well. See that this is just a thing with me. I really like covering up these edges. So I just take an extra minute or so just to put some paint on the edges of my painting. If I had painted the whole thing yellow, I wouldn't mind. I could keep the edges yellow. That could kind of look cool. Or you could paint them yellow afterwards. It's really just... I'd rather anything but just the blank white of the canvas. I always think that just makes it look a little bit cheap. And this... I always think about... I want my paintings to have an objectness quality. That they feel like they're... that you want to hold it in your hands, because it feels like I've thought every single thing through. Okay, so now we're going to go right up to these edges. If you make a mistake at this point, don't worry, you can just paint some white and you'll recover whatever you can paint white over top of this black and it'll disappear and you'll never know there was a problem. That's one of the great advantages that acrylic painting has over, let's say, watercolor, for instance, which you can paint over with white and watercolor, but it's it is, you know, I should just, let's go to a smaller brush here and I'm trying to do this outlining with a big thick brush, and you know what, it is a little bit hard for me to see, so I'm just gonna take my pencil, making sure I don't drag my sleeve over. There. Yeah, I guess it shows up on camera. This is gonna make... I was trying to see through this big mess of lines and was like, whoa, my goodness, this is kind of tough to see. Okay, there we go. And even, like, some of this, the edges that I'm doing right now, can be a little bit sloppy. You may want to just do a kind of a rough version of this outlining, and then at the very end, come back and touch it up. Because just depending on how you paint the rest of the painting, it may... you may have to do some touching up anyway, so this is still kind of part of what I always call like our underpainting process, right? And you never really want to spend too long on this stage of the painting. You just want to kind of get paint on here, and then move on. Okay, so what I got... 2 hours to get this done. Usually I also kind of give a little art history talk before I launch into the painting. Obviously I did that in the previous episode, so if you want to know more about Yayoi Kusama, you could watch the beginning of the previous episode for all of that information. There was right after I finished filming that episode on Thursday, I got all these notifications because one of her paintings just sold for, I can't remember how many millions of dollars at auction. Literally, probably at the exact moment we were filming the episode. Can't remember if I put that in the video description for that or not, but it probably may have came up on your own news feeds anyway if you're watching a lot of art videos like this. See, here it is. Stuff that I should just do very quickly and move forward, but that's why I have a huge understanding for anybody who's a bit of a perfectionist. I have always lots of perfectionist students in my classes, and I know what it's like. I know how hard it is just to let go, to put the paintbrush down, or so often when I'm telling other people to let go and not be so hard on themselves, I'm really talking to myself. Like, I mean, I'm kind of talking to myself right now, but and in its own way, like, I think making art helps us get over, forces us to be less perfectionist. Like, so, for instance, just as I was doing this, I realized, wasn't I just talking about, while I was talking about how we could paint anything out right here? Well, I think I'm going to have to do that right up here. Because that's supposed to be part of... So, I'll let this dry. We'll paint a little bit of white there, and we'll just do that again, right? No big deal. So let's get the... just want to get rid of any texture that's built up. I might have to do a second layer of this black. We'll see. Sometimes it's hard for me because of all these lights in here to see how well I've covered the surface, so I don't see it until I take it upstairs and put it on the mantle, and I go, whoa, okay, there's a lot of stuff that I missed. It's one of the odd things about doing this live on camera is the lights are set up in such a way that make it good for filming, but less ideal for actually me making the paintings in and of themselves. Because, you know, you want a well-lit space to paint in, but you probably don't want it to be as bright of a space as this. Anyway. So I'm going to blow dry that. I'm going to put some white paint up there. And then I may have to do another coat of black. We'll see. Yeah, I'm going to put just a little bit more black on that background. I can see a few places where I can see the white of the canvas showing through, and that's not such a bad thing, but, you know, if it takes me... It's one of those things that only takes an extra couple of minutes to do, but when the painting is up there on the wall, you can just be like, how come... Like, why did you not just, when you had the opportunity, just do it? Just takes an extra couple minutes, Michael. So, I'm going to listen to that voice of reason. As I said, you know, there's probably going to be some cleanup involved in a few places, so I'm not really going to go too careful about getting this all perfect. Just as long as I get it done there, it looks good. Taking away as much texture as I can. Okay, so I'm just going to clean these brushes off. So just doing this kind of thing really helps keep my water relatively clean, just so I can paint all afternoon with the same cup of water. When I'm teaching in person, I often see people going and cleaning their brush every 20, or their water like every 20 minutes or so, because it's like, they're like, oh no, look at this, it's all black, right? Well, it looks kind of black, obviously, but I could wash my brush and paint white with, you know, which I will do in just a second, and you would have no idea there was black ever on these brushes. So I think one of the mistakes people make is they often take a brush that's covered in paint and put it into the water, and then the water gets, understandably, very dirty very, very quickly. Here, all there was just the little bit of paint that was left on the brush. Okay, so let's just add, we're going to start using some white here. I'm just going to paint this back. Let's see what... I'm just going to soften those edges. And then we'll blow dry this. I'll have to put another coat of white on there, maybe even a third one, we'll see. So the reason why I'm kind of doing this over painting is I want to try to keep the texture as low as possible. Like, I don't want there to be a big lump when I get over here, some sort of smoothing out all the sides. this, and then I'm quite confident now that I can paint over this, and we'll have no idea that I made a so-called mistake there. Okay, maybe I'll keep that brush. Just get us another one. Oh, I gotta get some more yellow. Okay. Ooh, we got a little. Oop. All right, and then we just paint right over here. Yeah, it's obviously going to be a little bit more white for a second, but we'll do a couple coats, and you'll never know it was there. Or you might, because you saw me put it there, but no one else will know. It'll be our little secret. Even have to do a third. Let me see. Okay, I mean, I could put in a little bit more yellow or orange there, but I'm going to have to do that anyway. Now, or I'm going to have to use orange again. I've got this crazy idea. I haven't had a chance to use my white graphite paper yet. And I've had this for a while. I've never used it because in these episodes, I often, I want to try to make sure that everyone has the material so they can do the same thing that I'm doing. Now, this one is a little bit different. This is a one-sided paper. I'm 99% sure that the shiny side is the upside, and this side that is less shiny should be the downside. I'm sure the instructions say which is which, but this is what I do with my extra panels at the end of the night, or the extra paint that I have left over at the end of the night. I just smear it on a panel like that, and then I can use it for something. So let's just see if I go. Oh, I was completely wrong. Interesting. Okay, so the shiny side is the side that leaves the marks. The less shiny side is the upside. See? I'm basically always wrong. So, now this is a bit of a fool's errand here to try to match this up. In order to help myself match this up, I'm just going to take a pin here. Here's a little NASA pin. And I'm going to look for like a common point here. So this area in between here, if I put this that should be, I should be pretty close if I'm like right here, because I've put it in the same spot. So I'm just going to hold that down, and then let's just kind of see where would be another place. If I hold that down right in the edge, this is kind of hard to see what I'm doing, eh? Yeah, good enough. Okay. So this could be have been a really bad idea. Let's just see if I can, because I would be nice to get some of this original patterning that she did onto my painting. In the previous episode, I just sort of made it up. So let's see. Let's just try a few lines here. Ooh, I notice it's I have to be very careful. It's transferring some of the white onto the black, so I'm gonna have to be very careful not to put much pressure onto the black. I mean, I can paint over it. Oh, why am I doing that? Because there's no carbon paper up there, Michael. Ay, ay, ay. This is just going to help me get a little bit closer to her painting and the way that she did the background. It's been a while since I've used white graphite paper. I anticipate that it shouldn't be that hard to wipe it off if I'm not happy with where I put my lines, but every material's always a little bit different, and we won't really know until we pull the paper off how it all turned out. Now you could just eyeball this. In the previous episode, that's what I did. I just sort of did my best impression, I guess you could say. So let's pull that off. Right, can you see that? Not too bad. It's a little bit messy in a few places. And you can see some of the original, this is from the black carbon paper, is getting on there. So with each painting comes unique challenges. And there's going to be a few places where I just totally goofed and missed a line or two, which is not a big deal. I mean, if I just get half the lines on there, then I'm already doing pretty good with being able to, it kind of gives me all the landmarks that I need to finish it off myself. So that's the hope anyway. Sometimes this kind of thing can be more of a handicap than a help, right? It can you sometimes feel like locked into trying to do it exactly like the way that it had been done. And I'm just going to trace this back. There we go. Okay. See, remember I was saying I was going to miss a few things? Now it's too late. Which is, you know, I could have peeled half of it up to see, but let's move on. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint white lines everywhere that I put the this. I'm actually just going to see if I can erase. It's not coming up very well. I was expecting that I would be able to wipe it off with a little bit of a wet, which is a little bit dangerous on an acrylic painting because you can end up wiping paint away. But I just wanted to see, it doesn't wipe off very well. Which means I'll probably, maybe while I'm right here, let's just zoop, zip, zam, zoom. Put this right over my yellow. Since I had this brush with paint sitting there anyway. Any other lines that need to be covered? Okay, cool. So I got about an hour and a half before I gotta be done. Not bad. I think I can do that. Famous last words, though. So let's get out. I want kind of my smallest brush. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint white lines over top of all of these outside lines. And then I'm going to paint orange over top of them, right? So that I get closer to this particular image. And I want to try to get this part done. You see, there's sometimes there's a little bit of confusion here, so I'm just going to make some little changes. Oops. Now it's hard to do this in a way that's not a little bit sloppy if you're using these heavy body acrylics. So okay. Oops. Okay, I might have to paint yellow back in there again after all. Some of this is still really... I just painted wet paint on there and then put my hand in it. One thing you could do if you had a little bit if you have soft body acrylics or fluid acrylics that work really well for doing kind of finer outlining and details. Okay. So I want to be able to finish all of these triangular shapes with the white at least, let's say in 20 minutes. Let's say that's should be a good goal. Oops, let's move that there. If you do a little bit of a sloppy job at this, don't worry. You can paint black to clean up any kind of the white mess, just as we used white to clean up the black mess. You're never... One of the great things I think about with like acrylics is you're never really totally screwed, to be honest. Like, there's always something you can do to rescue a painting, which makes it one of the more unique art materials around. You can fix a an oil painting. The kind of the easiest way to do that is just literally scraping the paint off the canvas. You can, but it, you know, that paint has to be wet, otherwise you have to paint over it with white, just like we did. And if you do that, you have to wait. And you might have to wait a couple of days to do that, right? Whereas acrylic paint, you saw me make a mistake, and then within about 5 minutes, that mistake was basically gone, and like as if it was never been there. So that's a big deal, which makes acrylic a great material for beginners, because there's really nothing that, you know, because if you're using another material and you make a mistake and you're upset about it, and it's really hard to fix it, well, you know, something unforgiving like that can make learning that material very discouraging. That's why a lot of people these days learn how to paint with acrylics and then later on move to oil paints. In the same way that, you know, it's easier to learn how to drive on an automatic car that has an automatic gear shifting, and then after you figured out how to drive and how to merge into traffic and park your car on a hill and all that kind of stuff, after that, then you can get a car with a gear shift and a manual car, and it's a lot easier to do. So one little thing I'm thinking about as I'm doing this is that ideally I believe all of these should be triangles, right? So I'm just always kind of thinking like, okay, how do I transform this thing here into a triangle? Oops, I'm not even in the screen here. My apologies. So that's why sometimes ignoring the line that I traced, because it's possible that my line that was there might have been off a little bit, or the paper moved, or any number of reasons why it ended up the way it did. I'm going to put a tiny bit of glazing medium in there just to make the paint a little bit more fluid-like. And that should just make it just a bit easier to paint with. Many people would use water. I would strongly advise not using water, because the water is just going to thin it out and make it more transparent. Which, if you want it to be more transparent, then awesome. Great tool to use. Although you don't want to go too transparent, because if it gets too transparent, then you're actually breaking down the bonds that hold the paint onto the canvas. So it's potentially, if you have a lot of water on it, you're just hoping that it stays there. It's kind of like glitter that could flake off over time. Putting it into a thicker, putting the glazing medium into a thicker paint will, like I just did, help preserve a little bit of the opaque quality of the paint, as well as its adhesive properties, so that it won't start flaking off or crumbling or anything else like that. And maybe you can kind of see it. It does have, it's having a so far pretty good effect, making this a little bit more brushable. Maybe I'm just going to leap across to the other side, and we'll do this top corner here. Another thing maybe worthy of noting is you saw me using the hairdryer a number of times. It's probably not the best idea from an archival standpoint to be using the hairdryer and then very quickly thereafter putting more paint on top of it. Because maybe that paint that was originally applied might not have been as dry as you might hope. And putting wet paint on top of paint that is a little like half dried could potentially cause the paint on top to kind of buckle and shrink a bit. Probably won't crack. Oil paint would crack. Acrylic paint, because it's a plastic, you can roll it up if you wanted, although you might find it might stick to itself when you try to unroll it. So that might not be the best long-term. Really, rolling any painting is a bad idea. My wife and I have been watching this Netflix documentary on the theft of the paintings at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Great documentary. I think it's called... I don't know what it's called, actually. It just came out relatively recently. And hearing about how potentially because they still haven't recovered those paintings. Paintings worth $500 million. And I'm thinking actually painting one of the paintings that was stolen. But hearing that the thieves, who may not have been particularly into art, so, you know, no surprise there, but may have just rolled up the paintings to hide them and all that kind of stuff. These are oil paintings, and oil paintings, when they're rolled up, just start cracking and falling apart and potentially flaking off into pieces. And the worry is that if they ever do recover those paintings, that they may be virtually beyond repair. So let's just hope that that's not actually how they've been stored or cared for, because if that's the case, yeah, it's just a disaster. It's interesting, they suggest that the people that stole those paintings stole them because they were like mobsters, and that they could use those paintings as like bargaining chips to get out of jail. I'd never really heard of that was something that was done, but they show how many cases are these criminals were robbing paintings purely because they could just hold on to them in case they ever got arrested, and they could say, remember that big theft of that museum, 20 years ago or whatever? If you let me go, I will take you right to one of them. That painting that's worth, 120 million. I know where it is, but I'll only let you know if I can be at home having turkey dinner tonight. And so I found that fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, people make all sorts of deals with criminals all the time. So you can see I'm kind of going a little, I haven't actually looked at the screen in a while, which is, you're probably like, yeah, I could tell, it's what a mess. But let's go up here. Trying to find a way to get back to this pattern. And my heart's just pounding, trying to, like, okay. Whew, gotta get this done in a certain amount of time. doing this kind of thing is, for me, is a lot like a performance. And I've done lots of performances, and it gets easier, I guess, a bit, but often it's still very, I have to be very present, which is hard because I've also got all this technology to keep an eye on and make sure that my microphone is still working, which it has at times stopped working. It does, all of this is great practice for doing media and things. I've done a lot of interviews over the years on TV and newspapers, and having to fill up time. Actually, well, it's kind of almost the opposite. Being interviewed, you've got like, 5-10 minutes, maybe at most, to kind of, especially on a live broadcast, to get your point across and come across as intelligent, versus doing this. It's like I've got to fill a lot of hours. Okay, so let's zoom back out. So I got all my lines here painted white. I'm going to have to paint them yellow after all of this white dries. So I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer here in just a second. And ideally this would be, if everything goes well, the last time I need to use white. Everything else should be able to be done with just black and yellow, but you never know. Things always tend to go a little bit skewy and funny, so let's clean this brush. There is, again, lots of these lines up there that I'll take care of eventually. The black, when I'm using black. I'm trying to think, what should I do next? Actually, you know what? I'm just going to put... Just trying to clean up a few of these things. This is where I got some paint on my hand there. I mean, I also don't mind the white lines back there. They kind of are kind of cool as well. Paula says, "What a surprise! There was no notification, Michael. This is an accidental surprise. I just got in. Wow. You have class at 5 p.m. tonight, Alberta time. Michael, you have time for supper?" I have a Larabar and a Cliff Bar. That'll be my my dinner. Okay, I'm gonna blow dry all of this, and then I'm gonna start. Maybe I'll start putting some dots on here, and then we'll do the yellow lines over top, because maybe, who knows, I might actually like these white lines. I probably am going to paint it anyway, but, you know, I've just been painting these lines for the past half an hour. It might be nice just to do something different, right? Okay. So let's move on to these black dots here. That kind of drives me a bit nuts. Can't really see it. I think it'll disappear. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go over, see how there's the large areas here. I'm going to just very lightly divide this back up. Put the stem back on here. I don't want to go too hard because there isn't these lines anywhere in the painting, so I don't want them to be too dark and distracting. Just need something to help me. Let's see. I'm not exactly sure how she did these paintings herself, because doing this would be pretty tricky. Like, my mind, like, I don't know if I just have a small brain but I would have a hard time visualizing where all of these dots go without some sort of guidelines. Okay. So where should we start? I generally kind of like working left to right. So what I'm going to do, I got some black paint on here. I'm going to put a little bit more fresh paint on there. Not too much, because I'm going to use this for, I'm going to do a bunch of all this fine line work, and I just put a little bit of my glazing liquid. Not too much. Probably like 2 to 1 paint. This is just going to help. It has a bit of it slows the drying time down just a little bit, which is helpful, especially if I make a mistake. I should be able to wipe it away if I'm quick on it. And should make it just a little bit more brushable, as some people will say. Okay, and then now I'm going to use my smallest brush. Get in here. I don't want to put too much paint on here. Okay. So I think I'm going to start down here. And in fact, let's zoom right in. Oops, the other way. Okay. So I'm probably going to omit a few lines here and just do relatively large spots. Both out of like a concern for time and also because, you know, it's just kind of, it will drive me absolutely bonkers if I try to put in all of those tiny, tiny little circles. And I can tell you, I'm going to make some egregious mistake at some point on here. I'm going to put dots where they're not supposed to go, and I'm going to be frustrated. That's just kind of the way every painting goes. But especially, you know, when I find anyway, when I'm doing patterning work, it's very easy to kind of lose track of where you are and kind of just zone out, and which, you know, as we talked about last episode when you know, I really dived into her biography, one of the main reasons that she does this kind of artwork is for the meditative benefits that it provides, that she can paint all these dots, and it really quietens the voices in her head. Okay. And you know, if they're a little bit sloppy, I don't think it's going to make such a big deal. I think it's going to be kind of hard to see, you know, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, if you get up real close, you're going to see some of the mess potentially, right? But I don't know. I think if you just keep on moving forward, I think you'll surprise yourself that at the end of the day, whatever kind of messiness is really maybe only apparent to you. Like other people be like, wow, it looks really good. Wow, look how all those dots look so clean and perfect. Okay, one thing I'm noticing as I put my hand down here, it's sticking to the paint. Even though the paint is dry, my hand is kind of a little bit sweaty and it's kind of sticking there. So I'm just going to put something like a little piece of fabric there, which should ideally absorb the sweat in my hand. You could use wax paper. I would avoid regular paper because it's possible that the paper could stick to the canvas. So like I think I might do these dots here and then just small dots on that edge. So basically taking out a whole row of dots. Now most of her paintings like this they're not giant, but you know, they're usually probably like 2 by 3 feet or something. It's about the size of like your movie poster. If you remember what a movie poster looked like. It seems like movie posters I remember as a kid that was like a big deal. I used to go places and buy posters all the time. Do people still buy posters? Like teenagers, do they get posters to cover their walls of their bedroom? What do teenagers do these days? Do they just play video games all day long and they don't care? I don't. Alright, so now I'm just going to go to this next level here. So this should help speed things up as well if I'm only doing, let's say, 75% of the dots. And even then I'm probably doing my dots are probably bigger than her dots anyway. Okay. How did that black get on there? My goodness. Let's see if we can erase that with a little bit of water really quickly. There we go. Okay. I'm going to blow dry. I just wiped that off. I'm going to blow dry it because sometimes adding a little bit of water to it like that can activate it a bit. Jeanette says, this artist whom created this wonderful art has a lot of imagination. It seems to me that the pickles form the pumpkin. Yeah, that's interesting. There's a whole bunch of pickles together, like in a bunch of pickles. Never saw it that way. That's cool. That's pretty funny. Okay. I'm just going to use another, this is another old sock. Right, that I can rest my hand on. Okay, so let's continue here. Let's go down. I'm gonna work my way from here back up. So we'll maybe what I'm gonna do is start with maybe a little bit larger circles. So by the time I make it up here, I don't have to be doing these like miniature, microscopic circles, so that might also help me if I do them a little bit bigger. I think some people may also be tempted to do like a few here and then keep on going up and then kind of do it all the way. That could work. It could work. I would be leery of doing that because you may get to, especially kind of like when we start curving around the side here, could get a little bit tricky. But hey, if you got a system that works for you, awesomeness. By no means am I saying that there's only one way to do this and my way is the only way that works. You know, there's some parts of this, again, I'm a little bit pressed for time, so I'm kind of just moving as quickly, basically as quickly as I possibly can without doing the worst job possible. And so that's also going to affect the quality of this painting. You know, she had no restriction on how long she could spend on her paintings, which is the ideal thing, obviously. Ideally, when you're painting, you can just take your time, as you should. I think for painting should be, for everyone, a relaxing process. It should be something that brings you joy, that you find kind of like a break from the rest of your daily life, and and not a chore, something that makes you feel anxious. And that's why, you know, I want people to try as many different styles as possible. That's why I choose such a diverse group of artists, from classical artists to modern, contemporary artists, avant-garde artists, traditional art, you know, so that everyone, you know, especially if you follow along and you try to do all of the paintings I'm doing, certain kinds of things are going to start becoming more apparent to you. Certain kinds of paintings are going to be just more pleasurable for you to do than others. Certain paintings you're going to go like, wow, that was so much fun. In fact, I had so much fun painting that Kusama painting. I want to do a few more paintings by her. And I'm going to just take it upon myself to go and, you know, trace out some more images onto canvases, and I'm just going to paint those because I had such a blast doing it. And then there's certainly other people who will look at this. Maybe they don't even have to start it, and they just go like, yeah, I'm not doing that. No way. Not interested in that. That's going to take way too long. It looks real painstaking, and that does not look like fun. You know, I totally get it. I'm sure that there's some people tuning in right now and just like, that is crazy. All those dots, it's going to take him hours to do. And they're right. It's going to take me hours. Although, again, I got another show starting soon, so I have to be... I can't linger. So now I got to make these a little bit smaller. And anyway, I think it's really important to have those moments, those realizations, and to kind of just think to yourself, like, what kind of painting do I prefer painting? Because the sooner you decide what kinds of painting you're most attracted to, then and also sometimes you might want to paint like Rembrandt or Manet or something much more classical. But when you actually paint those paintings, you're like, oh gosh, this is not fun at all. In which case, that's, you know, that can cause some people a little bit of existential kind of crisis. But that's a good experience to have, because it brings you closer to what you actually want to do. Right? It's an insight should you choose to listen to what your body and your brain and your heart are telling you. So it's interesting. So what's, you know, obviously when I get up into this area here, it's a little bit different. Maybe I shouldn't have done those circles quite so big. To start, I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to keep on plowing forward here. So, I think doing these larger circles is helpful for me personally. I'm going to continue doing them. I think by the time I'm done, I've got all these little dots in here. I don't think there's going to be any question. Like, people are going to know exactly who made this painting. I don't think it's going to be any big mystery that it's a Yayoi Kusama painting. Especially from further away. And as I said, there might be some people who really do not like this kind of slow painting process. There's bound to be some people who do like it and who think like, wow, this is the thing I've been looking for. You know, like, oh, all these other videos on YouTube tell people how to paint, faces and realistically. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to paint. Or or maybe I thought I did. But once I started painting like this, I realized, oh, this makes me really happy. This is, I get to, just like Kusama, I can kind of turn my brain off and I can just paint away, and the time just disappears. And again, that's like a breakthrough moment. One of the things that I get my students at Emily Carr, the university I teach at, to do is to make a list. We go through the art book. That book you can find at pretty much any bookstore that's got one page for every artist, and we go through that book. We talk about all the problems with it, how it's mostly just dead white men. So make no mistakes. I don't think that book is necessarily the most representative. I don't think it's not only. I think it's a very poor representation of all the great art that's ever been made. But it is. We go through that, and we go through it really quickly. Actually made a video of it on the internet or on YouTube, but it's not live. It's a private video. Maybe I'll make it public, or maybe I'll make a video, add to it explaining kind of the process. But anyway, we flip through it. I made a video where I'm flipping through it and students watch it, and then I have a little handout that they look at while they're doing that, and they circle the names of artists that they are interested in as we look at the book, and then they cross out names that they're not interested in, and they just leave blank name or the names of artists that they're just like, meh, whatever, interesting, but. And then at the end we do a little exercise where we kind of try to write down what the common qualities of the things that they liked and disliked were. And it's so interesting going around the room after that experience, because there's some people who are like, oh, there was all these pictures of kings and queens dressed up in robes and all this old portraiture, and I just wanted to barf when I looked at that. But the photography I thought was super interesting. The abstract painting I thought was super cool. And those are huge realizations. Oh, maybe I'm more interested in abstract painting than portraiture. And then there's some students who have the exact opposite. They're like, oh, there were all these really cool paintings, classical paintings of people and whatever. Landscapes, I love all that. It looks super cool. That's the kind of art that I want to do. And so everyone comes out of it really having a little bit clearer idea of the kind of art that they're interested in. And also, I've been doing that same exercise myself for the last few decades. I started doing that when I was an art student at the Royal College in London, England, and let me see, just before I move on here. So we'll start down there at the bottom. Which row should we do? I think it's... Oh, that's got paint on it. Always got a... There's always a little bit of paint that sneaks up on you somewhere. Yeah, I started doing that when I was a student at the Royal College in London, England, and I found it really helpful. I don't know where I got that idea. I probably read it somewhere. I can't take all the credit for the idea, but what's super interesting is I've kept that file, and I've gone back and I've gone through the book again, because I've taught this when I do it with students. I do it all the time, and so I open up this file on my computer, and I can see my choices from like basically every couple of years for the past 20 years. And what's super interesting is how my own choices have changed quite radically over that period of time. You know, and they've gone back and forth. There's been times where I think when I first started doing that, where I was a big fan of classical art, and I didn't understand, things like Marcel Duchamp and ready-mades and a lot of avant-garde painting and sculpture. I just thought it was garbage. And then after being in art school for a while and being in art history classes and studying all these different things and learning about different artists, I was like, wow. And then I kind of seesawed and went all the way over to the other side, where it's like, ugh, all of this classical painting is garbage. But you know what I'm super into is this, like, abstract stuff. It's super cool. Oh, there's a whole philosophy behind that process, and I understood it, and I started making that kind of work myself. And then flash forward, a few years later, and it's like I'm back on the other side. And I'm like, yeah, that was kind of interesting, that whole period of experimentation. And then a few years later, I'm back on the other side. And I have no problem admitting that my tastes have evolved and changed and continue to change. And honestly, I hope that they continue to change for the rest of my life. I don't want to be the same person in 40 years that I was right now. I hope that I'm always growing and changing. Otherwise, sort of, it's, what's the point? What's the point of being around if, like, I've got it all figured out at, age 20? What's the point of the next 50, 60, 70 years of one's life? Anyway, I know there's some people who have very different opinion about that That makes it sound like I'm a big waffler and I can't make up my mind about things. And it is interesting. There's, you know, I'm friends with people who are very set in their ways, and when we talk about things, I know basically before that I even have a conversation, open my mouth, how they feel about a lot of things. And there's something quite reassuring about that. You know, that's sort of what we tend to expect from our politicians, as people that have voted one way throughout their entire lives, and any variation of that is waffling and flip-flopping and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I tend to think that the ability to change one's mind is a virtue. And I'm actually quite forgiving of politicians who have evolved over time. And especially on like certain social issues, which I won't get into, but you know, I think I'd much rather someone kind of lighten up as they get older and become a little bit less rigid in their ways. But again, I know plenty of people in my own circle of friends who will argue this point with me endlessly. So, and that's, I love good debate, so I'm glad they are my friends. You know, as I'm doing this too, I wouldn't worry about making perfect little circles. I mean, it depends on what your goal with this kind of a painting is, but I think if you're just managing to kind of get some kind of blobs on the canvas, that should be pretty good. All right. I mean, I'm halfway done these circles, and you know, it's taken me about 30 minutes or so to get this far, so I mean, I'd love to be able to get everything done here in the next 45 minutes or so. That might mean I might not be able to get the background finished in the time that I want, but I will eventually finish it. If I don't finish it by the end of the episode, I will probably finish it at like midnight tonight kind of thing. You know, one thing you could possibly do is just to kind of create stamps for yourself to do all of this. That could be a really fun activity for kids. You could do it with like little stickers. You get stickers from like the dollar store, and you put stickers on the canvas, or a real fun thing for, you know, someone probably 12, 14 years old. I think a little, if it's too complicated for you little kids, it could just be quite frustrating for them. But so, you know, some of these are a little bit, I've made kind of a few tiny little mistakes, and I have to just think to myself, do I want to try to fix that mistake, or can I just let it go? Or can I just, if I do want to fix it, then I will just leave it towards the very, very end, and then I'm just going to clean it up at that point. Okay, so now I've been painting everything. It does feel like it might be easier if I rotate this canvas to get some of that. But I'll have to blow dry it, and maybe at this point, maybe it's worth kind of taking a break from the dots and painting the yellow lines in the background. I don't know. Let me just decide. I'll blow dry this and... Some of those black dots are being very stubborn. So I'm going to paint the yellow in the background, those lines, while I wait for, because some of these have got little peaks on them, and just blow drying them it's going to take longer to. So let's move on to those yellow lines. We'll come back once all that black is dried. So same sort of thing. I'm going to put I put the yellow right out of the tube, and I'm going to put some of the glazing fluid here. It makes a pretty good material for just making the paint just a little bit more fluid. Right out of the tube, it's pretty thick, right? It's because it's called heavy body acrylic, right? It's intended to be kind of nice and thick for various different applications. But that's not what I want to use it for. Now, as I've mentioned before, there is other materials you can use. Let's see, where should we start? I want to start somewhere where I can easily reach over the whole painting here. So, as we saw when I was painting over top of the white, right? Remember I made a few mistakes and I was kind of cleaning it up. I ended up having to do a few layers of this orange, because this orange is not particularly very opaque. So the question will just be, as I'm painting this, do I need to do a second layer of all of this yellow orange, or can I just let it be and move on? So we will find out as we do this here and as this dries. I will probably only have a chance to do one layer. Obviously, the more that I do, the kind of more solid this color will be, and the less white will be shining through. You can see that I'm being a little sloppy. I would probably be this sloppy regardless of how much time I had, because I'm going to have to go back and clean up, paint over some of those initial graphite transfer lines that I painted onto the black with the white graphite paper. I have to paint over all that anyway, so I'm going to have to come in and clean a bunch of stuff up. So, I mean, obviously the better it is right off the bat, the less extra work you have to do later, right? But I also would not just be too worried about being perfect to do all of this. In fact, I could see some people just taking the orange paint and just painting directly over everything, just like taking a big brush, painting the whole thing, and then just going over and painting these kind of triangles back in place, which might seem to kind of defeat the purpose, but actually that way would probably get you the most consistent and the best results, honestly, because you could do it probably pretty quickly. And now as I say that, I start thinking, like, should I do it? Should I? Probably not, just in terms of my time here. You know, I could imagine some people tune in and might see some of this, and it might look kind of sloppy at this particular stage. It's always important to remember, and I think some people maybe as they're painting it might feel the same way. They're like, oh man, this looks really sloppy. You always have to remember that the painting is not done. You're seeing it at an unfinished stage. When you see a painting in a museum or in an art gallery, it's done. The artist has looked at it, has analyzed it to death, you know, and made a decision. You know what? Okay, I feel like I can walk away from this. I feel happy. I'm happy enough to show it to the public now. Very rarely does anyone get to see this, what we're doing right now, all the messy stuff in behind the scenes, right? And before it's been cleaned up and presented, it's the same sort of thing. Like, you know, if you've ever put a party together and, you know, you want everything to be perfect. You don't want guests showing up an hour early while you're still hanging the stuff and doing whatever in the kitchen. It can be really stressful, right? You want it to look really great and people to walk in and just be like, wow, it looks amazing. Like, I remember on our wedding day, where we got married. We got married to this awesome cider house on Vancouver Island called Cider. And they make cider, like alcoholic cider. And they have this big vineyard, or apple orchard as a vineyard. And it's beautiful. You know, I have a tasting room. That's where we got married. But there was kind of a, I can't remember how it worked. Like at 4 o'clock or something, the tasting room closed down, and then we had, I think, 1 hour to move all the tables and chairs and get the seating and everything arranged. And people started showing up half an hour early, like, hey, this would be cool, let's go there early, and maybe, and it was just like, I was not impressed. I was like, because I was running around. My wife was upstairs, you know, doing her thing, getting her clothes and makeup and all that kind of stuff ready, so people want to come up and chat, and I eventually just told the groomsmen, like, go to the door and just do not let people in anymore. Of course, people would like, oh, well, I'm gonna go around the back door and go and say hi. It's just, so personally, I, from that experience, will never show up to a wedding early. I will be there. I can be there right on time, maybe even a few minutes. Not late, but just give them their space, let them do their thing, because I remember how stressful that was, having all these people showing up wanting to chat before I was ready. Anyway. Whew. really looking forward to seeing what other people produce out of this and what decisions people made if they decided to paint these lines yellow like I'm doing right now, or if they decide to keep them white or just keep the background black entirely. I could see people doing that. Or potentially using the technique we did last class, which is to actually paint all of the triangles individually. There's just so many different ways of approaching it, so which way are you doing it? And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, please do so that I can see the incredible work that you've done. So I was going to just maybe paint half of the yellow and then blow dry and then paint the black dots. Because some of this yellow I've kind of built up some texture. So we will see. Obviously that's not happening. I mean, it's kind of, you know, to get the same yellow that we have on the pumpkin itself, I'd have to do at least another coat of this yellow. And I just can't see that happening time-wise, because I'll still have to clean it up. So it's going to be slightly off color, which is a bit of a bummer. You know, I could leave it and then paint more on it later, but I think I'm just going to set it and forget it, as the one and only Ron Popeil used to say about the, I don't know what device that was that he was hawking, that some kind of cooking machine, wasn't it? I wonder if Ron Popeil is still around. That was the golden age of infomercials. We don't have cable or anything, so the only thing we watch is, you know, movies on our. Well, we have a television, but it's hooked up to Netflix. Basically, it's a smart TV, and so I don't even. Do they still make infomercials these days? Does that, or do they? I mean, they probably do, but I just obviously haven't seen infomercial in forever. Okay, I'm just going to clean up a few here where there's egregiously white showing through. It'll look better when I clean all that up. I'm quite confident. So. Oh, let's get. Okay. So, what are we going to do next? I'm going to blow dry all of this. Then I'm going to finish painting the black dots, and then I'm going to paint in black just to clean up all of this here. And ideally, I should be done. Well, I've only got a certain amount of time left, so before the next episode goes live. So we'll see how much I can get done here. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this, and then I'm going to rotate this as well, so that I can do this side of the canvas. Got our black in here. I'm going to put a little bit more glazing fluid just to keep it nice and wet, and I'll put even a little bit more black, fresh paint. The fresher the paint, the easier it is to paint with, because acrylic paint dries when oxygen interacts with it. So if you're trying to use paint that's been sitting out for a couple of hours, it's just going to drive you completely bonkers. So okay, so where should we begin? Actually, oops, that's right there. Where did that black come from? Trying to see this area here. So remember, some of this area here was stuff that where there was a so-called mistake, right? Remember I had to paint out this area right in here with some white and then put yellow back on top of it. And now all of that is gone. And basically you'd never know that there was ever any issue here whatsoever. Okay. I could see some people trying to use, let's say, tape in order to facilitate this process of like these semicircles. I think honestly it would just be more trouble than it's worth trying to tape it off and then cut the tape, and so. But you know, if you really wanted hyper precision, see that one thing I'm doing is I'm lifting this old sock every time I need to move, so that rather than sliding it around on the canvas, just as another way if there's any wet paint under here, because I had some pretty big texture pieces, little peaks as they're called, painting all these little dots. And I'd rather the dots get smooshed down rather than smudged to the side. Smooshed down just means they're going to be a little bit bigger, wider circles. But if they're smudged, then I might have to go in and they could end up causing all sorts of damage. So you do whatever you got to do to make it work. But that's just a little something I've learned. Okay. It does make a huge difference using a clean brush and new black paint. By the end, before I transitioned to painting the yellow in the background, the paint was like, I slowed down dramatically as I was painting because there's so many lumps in the paint, right? Because it's starting to dry out a bit and get a little chunky. Versus right now, I'm going, you know, probably an extra 40%, 30% faster than I was. So that's another reason why I always tell people is to just put as little paint onto your palette as required, so that you're always using fresh paint. If you need more paint, by all means, squeeze out more paint when you need it. And therefore you've got nice paint that's in its best possible kind of condition. And, you know, for some people that might sound really, really obvious, but I tell you, when I teach classes in person, and who knows when that'll happen again, the vast majority of people will squeeze as much paint, like they just feel, okay, I gotta get up there, you know, it's like people at a buffet, you know, like, okay, I don't want to run out, I don't have to get up halfway through the painting, because we have like a paint station that I can take one of the tables in the middle of the room, put all the paint on it, and you know how many times I will tell people will still squeeze big gobs of paint, which inevitably just goes into the garbage because people won't use it all, so, which is a whole other thing of just wasted paint material, right? When I see all that paint go in the garbage, I just think, oh, look at all the great paintings that won't be able to be made because it's just going into the landfill. If you love having big gobs of paint on your palette, you should really explore oil paint. Oil paint, you can put big gobs of paint on your palette, you can leave it on there for weeks at a time, and it will dry very, very slowly, and when you're ready, you can dip your paintbrush in it, you could paint for a while, put your paintbrush down, go have a cup of coffee, take a nap, and your paint is still going to be not as wet as it was when you first squeezed it out of the tube, but pretty darn close. I mean, depending on how thick the paint is on the palette, obviously, but my last pickle, as Jeanette said there, because they kind of look like big pickles, don't they? Actually, I'll keep it on its side there, on the original on the screen there. Makes kind of sense with what I'm doing. Remember, if you want the original image, first of all, it's very easy to find on the internet, but I've got a copy of it in the Dropbox folder if you want to. You can even print it out to refer to if you like. Whatever makes your painting process easier. That circle's getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the second. Oh, I'm so happy to be making this painting. I'm trying to think, what are the artists I made multiple paintings for? The first time I did this was for the Hilma af Klint paintings in our How to Paint series. That was quite early on, and I actually did 2 episodes because I didn't finish. I started 2 paintings and didn't finish either of them in that. I think I may have finished one. and then there was a second one I began and then didn't finish. So and then some of the longer, more process-oriented ones, like the Takashi Murakami. Actually filmed, I think 6 or 7 episodes, but I obviously didn't put them all up there because one day I'll edit them all together into something. Oops, that's not on screen, so let's zoom out a bit here. Okay, Michael. One of the stories of Yayoi Kusama, which I didn't mention last episode, which only occurred to me afterwards, is when Kusama moved to New York in the early 50s, like 1956 or something. You know, at that time, abstract painting, abstract expressionism was at its kind of zenith. You know, that's Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko and Robert Motherwell, Franz Kline, Helen Frankenthaler, etc. And she likewise was making abstract paintings in Japan. And she moved to New York, and she was probably, when would she would have been in her probably mid-20s when she came out there. And she brought with her a suitcase full of artworks. I think she had something like 20 or so abstract paintings on paper in her suitcase, which she used to, she exhibited and sold. And actually, speaking of the news recently, those paintings were just on sale just on Thursday, I think. I totally by coincidence, during the time we were filming the episode. Honestly, did not plan that, but those, I think a suite of them, like 9 or 10 or something, of those very first paintings that she brought with her in her suitcase to New York, sold. I think all 12 of them, something like 20 million or some crazy thing. And of course, when she bought them, she made, you know, enough probably to pay her rent for a month or two or something. But she was desperately poor when she, you know, after, you know, I've lived in New York, and I was a literally poor, starving artist when I was there eating. I would have a box of macaroni and cheese per day. I remember when my parents came to visit me, they were a little bit alarmed at how thin I was. Because I've always been a little bit of a bigger boy. And anyway, she was so desperate that she would dive in dumpsters and fish food, particularly vegetables and fish heads, out of the dump, out of the garbage, go home and boil them all, which is actually pretty kind of smart, right? Because you can get rid of all, well, not probably as much bacteria and everything, but she would boil them and make soup. So she'd make her own fish head soup out of the vegetables and food scraps that she pulled out of the garbage. And, you know, she obviously was willing to do anything to survive. And, I mean, she could probably have just gotten on a plane and went back to Japan. But she was determined to make it. And kind of the rest is history. But I remember reading that and thinking, like, wow, that is hardcore. Oh, pulling, you know, rotten or maybe it wasn't rotten, but just fish out of the garbage, any kind, even no matter how fresh it would be. You know, I mean, I enjoy fish occasionally. But anyway, I just thought it was just like, and considering how much her work sells for now, and even those early works, as I said, have sold for, it's just remarkable. Okay, so I got all my dots in, which is, that's the big thing. A couple things, obviously I'm going to do the stem. I'm going to work my way there. Let's tidy up all of these marks down here in the black. So anything that was a little bit sloppy, now's my chance to kind of take care of it. And it's going to immediately improve things quite dramatically. Like, I can already feel like, okay. That's more like what I had in my mind when I was starting. And then you kind of sometimes overdo it like I just did. In fact, so much so that if you're fast at it, you can just wipe it away with your finger, right? So this is where I was saying at the very beginning of the episode, like if you could kind of be a little sloppy outlining the pumpkin with black, because we're probably going to go back in here and touch up this stuff anyway, and we are. So this would be a time where you could do any of that cleaning. Okay, I'd like to be done in about 10 minutes. So at the very least, I got a moment to go to the bathroom. So this makes a huge difference. It maybe doesn't kind of appear on camera so well. And this is why, you know, I said you could potentially just paint over all of, like, you paint all these white lines, and then you could do a couple of layers of yellow, just paint over all of it, and then clean it up, paint all these triangles back in. Now that would take significantly longer, but I would say that would be the way to get literally the very, very best results, because you'd have The lines exactly where you want them, and you could be really, really precise. So, and that might have been how she did it too. I could see some kind of effort like that being, because as simple as this painting is, she's used some type of technique here, and she's hidden her work really well. So it's kind of hard to decipher exactly how the process that she used to make it all happen, which, as we've talked about in many different episodes, is typical of a lot of artists who, you know, go to great pains to sort of cover their tracks, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm kind of touching everything up. I probably should just speed this up, and this would be something that I could do in my own time, but I won't do it in my own time. That's why I'm like, I know I'm not going to do this unless I do it right now, so... It's a little shiny at the moment, but once all of that, the black dries, it just cleans. It looks really cool. You can also significantly thin out these big lines as well if you want to make them look even better. Of course, all of anything you do at this point is you know, just adds a little bit more time on it, and depending on what your goal for today is, you may feel just getting the dots there accomplished what you want. So okay, what should we do? Let's turn it this way. And actually, let's take a look at this. Okay. So this is going to be another area where I'm going to have to paint some white. I'm going to paint white dots and paint it black over top. I didn't even really spend too much time thinking about this until just now. Okay. So I paint that all black. I'm going to put white dots on there shortly once it's dry. I should have been paying a little closer attention earlier to that, but obviously I didn't, so. While that's drying a bit here, I'm just going to continue touching things up. So we're getting up into some of this mess that I did. Remember, I sort of painted around lines. I wasn't happy with the lines as I traced them. So there's kind of a bit of a mess under here, which is exactly what I'm trying to clean up right now. Ah, time. Okay, let's blow dry. I'm just going to keep on painting while it's still dry. Actually, let's keep it on this side. Clean my brush off really quickly. I'm gonna go into with my white. Interesting to see how this. I haven't quite done anything quite like this here with painting orange over top of these dots. Okay. Blow dry that, hopefully, and then I'll keep on painting with the black. Okay. And then let's paint. I guess I'll do it this way. Some of the yellow on the brush, and then let's should some water on my brush just to make sure it's brush is dry. Let's do that again. That up with some black. Let's get kind of, that white was not bad either. I could have been convinced to just leave it white. Kind of hard to do these little tiny dots on top of the white. It doesn't seem to take very well. Okay, let's just do a tiny bit of, well, I'm gonna blow dry this, and I gotta go over a few things real quick. Okay. So close, so close, so close. Okay, so can I live with that? I think I can live with it. I have to live with it. Pretty good, especially considering the kind of the race against time to get it all done. So Let's get the marker out here. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when upcoming videos are happening, like spontaneous ones like today's. If you are feeling generous and you want to support the show and the work that I'm doing here, please consider leaving a donation. There's a link to PayPal below. If you don't like PayPal, I totally understand. Some people aren't into it. So you can send a check or a money order or a St. Bernard with a bottle of wine wrapped around its neck. To my email or to where I teach at Emily Carr University. But if you send anything to the school, let me know so that I can go pick it up, because I've only been there once since over the past year and a half, because everything's been in lockdown and I've just been teaching from home like this for the longest time. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining me. Another great episode. I'm so happy that I got a chance to do this. You can see them side by side. Obviously, there's a few little things in here that are going to drive me nuts, but I think ultimately for what we were able to do in such a short amount of time, again, relative short amount of time, I feel pretty happy about that. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining me once again. We will see you guys in about 10 minutes. I have to get ready for the next episode, so we'll see you then. If not, then we'll see you at the next time. Okay, everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you very, very again soon. Bye-bye.